What's up, guys? Jerry here with another movie review, little delayed reaction. It's not a first impression anymore because I saw this movie like last week. Anyhow, let's get right to it. I saw Nightcrawler. Nightcrawler is a new film starring Jake Gyllenhaal, and right off the bat I gotta say I'm really happy that Jake Gyllenhaal has become an actor. I'm sorry, that was mean. Jake Gyllenhaal was always a guy I never really thought that much about, and recently he's just been blowing me away. Like, Prisoners, his performance in Prisoners, fucking the sun. And recently he's been blowing me away. I mean, his performance in Prisoners is one of my favorite performances in recent memory. I don't know how long, but he really did blow me away in that movie, and he's continuing that streak here. So, Nightcrawler is a movie written and directed by a guy named Dan Gilroy. He's been working as a writer in Hollywood for a while, and you actually might recognize his brother's name, Tony Gilroy. Tony Gilroy wrote a number of the Bourne movies. He wrote, I believe, Michael Clayton, Duplicity. He's been kicking around, and I actually quite like Tony Gilroy as a writer, so this is his brother Dan. His 10th, I believe, writing project, and his first as a director. So how does it check out? Well, let's get into it. Nightcrawler is a very strange film in a lot of ways, in all the ways I kind of like, you know, generally. This is a movie about this slimy opportunist named Lou Bloom. Louis Bloom is his name, and we sort of happen upon him at the beginning of this film, sort of looking for gainful employment, and he sort of stumbles his way into the field of night crawling, as one of the characters refers to it as, which is basically getting a camera, showing up at crime scenes and recording, you know, footage of victims or wreckage or whatever, and then selling that footage to local news stations for them to, you know, put on their headline stories. So, this is a really twisted movie in a lot of very interesting ways, and to me this almost played like a black comedy, like a really, really dark comedy, because so much of it is very absurd in the way Lou Bloom manages to get around. Because this guy, and again, I gotta hand it to Jake Gyllenhaal, he is incredible in this movie. He really embodies this guy, and you forget about Jake Gyllenhaal, really. I mean, which I guess is the great mark of any character actor, which is sort of what he's becoming now, it seems like. He's really gaunt, and he's got these bug eyes, and he has this, he's very persuasive, and he's very sort of, you get this sense that this is one of those guys who spent a lot of time studying, you know, various ways of influencing people and business, and he would do really well in network marketing, I would imagine. Like, this is the kind of guy who knows all the various quotes and sayings and philosophies of how to work your way up and how to influence people and how to say the right things to get people to do what you want them to do. So he's this skeevy, opportunist, manipulator guy, and he's just fantastic. He's so compelling to watch, and he's so kind of upsetting in a very sly and interesting way. He also doesn't blink very much, which is just freaking creepy. So yeah, Jake Gyllenhaal is definitely a big standout in this movie, and there are a lot of good performances in it too. I mean, I quite liked Rene Russo. I really like Bill Paxton, who shows up as a supporting character, who I'd forgotten completely that he was in it up until he showed up on screen. So that was a nice surprise. And Riz Ahmed is also in this movie. He's an actor who's been in some things recently. He looked familiar to me when I saw it, and I didn't quite fully know where I recognized him from, but he sort of plays this slackery guy who joins Jake Gyllenhaal's organization, so to speak. And he's also really good, and their interplay off each other is great. So this is a movie that really does sort of stand on its performances, and while it does certainly have a plot that goes somewhere, it is kind of a character study in a lot of ways, a very sick and twisted one at that. You're sort of watching this guy do whatever he can to just keep gaining power and influence and whatnot. And it's a really compelling, twisted, dark movie, and I gotta hand it to them because they balance a lot of tones really well in very strange ways. You know, I was laughing a lot during this movie, not because I thought it was silly or because it's a comedy, so to speak, but there are so many sort of sly and ridiculous things that this guy gets away with, and the things that this guy says to people, and it's funny because we understand him, but the people around him don't necessarily. So, there's a lot of really dark humor here, and then sometimes it's legitimately unsettling, and it does get under your skin, especially in some of these crime scene sequences that really clue you into just how dark and depraved Louis Bloom is, you know, at his core. And there are certain moments as well where it gets into that territory where you're like, this isn't a horror movie, but it's a horror movie. You know, there are some moments that are really tense and suspenseful and you know, unsettling. So I really gotta hand it to them for the tone. I also really like the way it was shot. It's captured really well, and it's captured in a very interesting and uncomfortable way, and in a way that sort of supports the voyeuristic and the intrusive quality of the work that Lou Bloom is doing here. So that's a good formic thing. And I also liked a lot of the music. There are some music choices that are a little peculiar, because the music almost seems to operate in this ironic way half the time, where you are sort of watching this guy as he accrues success, and in a normal movie, like in a movie about an actual good guy, you know, that music would be fitting. It's just that Louis Bloom is not a good guy, and his rise to success is perhaps not a good thing in the greater scheme of living. But, so there are some ironic music choices there, although they did work for me once I sort of at least arrived at that conclusion, I guess you would say, because they added another layer to that humor. It supports his emotion, even if we, the audience, aren't. So he's sitting there, there's one scene where he's sitting there in the news station after they've just, you know, bought some particularly great piece of footage, and the music swells as he sits there and sort of revels in his, you know, achievement. And the music supports that, even though we're sitting here going like, ooh, no, like, it does also sort of raise questions and touch upon the idea of desensitization to violent images in our society, and how far broadcast news is going into shock, you know, to grab ratings and stuff, and the business behind journalism. And I'm not, again, an expert, but I do know some people who have studied journalism, and that's a lot of what the deeper implications of this movie are about, are ethics in journalism, in the news, in crime reporting and whatnot, and how intrusive a lot of this stuff is. It does sort of pick up and play with that disconnect from humanity. You know, you're watching these people pore over these videos from crime scenes of people bleeding or of wounds being patched up by EMTs and stuff like that, and they're sitting there like, oh, this is great footage, and you're like, but it's people, and no, do we need to see this? So it is relevant in that way, because, you know, news, especially now, has become sort of a dubious platform, because news now is subject to money and ratings and shock, and we gotta bring people to our station versus another station. So it does play with and touch on those ideas, and they are relevant today, you know, because you turn on the news and it's sort of increasingly upsetting nowadays. So that's, you know, a sort of interesting facet about this movie. As much as it is a character study, it's also sort of a portrait of society in that way. So I think it is a really interesting piece on those levels, and I really liked what they did here. It's dark, and it's kind of mean and nasty in certain ways, but it finds a way to make you really enjoy watching very not likable people. So I gotta give them credit for that, and I really like this movie a lot. So yeah, Nightcrawler, definitely go check it out. You know, it might not be everyone's cup of tea, but it's certainly the kind of thing that appeals to me, and they did a great job for my money. I'm really excited to go see it again, as twisted as that sounds. So yeah, let me know your thoughts. If you saw Nightcrawler, what did you think about it? And you know, let's talk about Jake Gyllenhaal. What's your favorite Jake Gyllenhaal movie in recent memory? Because, you know, he's kind of, him and Matthew McConaughey, man, they've come out of the stint of doing these sort of, you know, Hollywood romantic comedies and various things like that, and now they're starting to take on really interesting and really weighty roles now, and I'm really excited to see that. So what have you seen of Jake Gyllenhaal's recent work, or maybe even his older work that you really liked? Let's talk about that. So yeah, like, subscribe, comment, all that. Be kind to your compatriots in the comments box. Let's keep it constructive. And until next time, cheers.